Just Baseball coming your way in less than 30 minutes here on Sports Grid. Let's check in with Aram Leighton. We've got the latest on the hot stove and everything happening in Major League Baseball with Aram, who weighs in each and every Tuesday with us here on the show. Aram, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And of course, you could read all of their columns over at justbaseball.com. Okay, so we did have one pretty significant signing this week. It was a slow week, as you would expect in baseball. The hot stove certainly has to pick up pretty soon here as we're getting closer to spring training. But the one notable signing was a forced one because there was a deadline. So
Yep.
Tatsuya Imai, who all we were hearing this offseason was a 150, $200 million player. Well, so much for that. That didn't happen. His stats were fantastic overseas, but it did not lead to this mega contract that everybody predicted 2 months ago it would. So why was everybody wrong here, Rom?
It is interesting. I think the talent is still that of a pitcher who can, be worthy of 100 to 150 million dollars. And I do think that there were more offers on the table from what I understand, probably for a little bit more money, but not in the patented Boris 1+1+1, plan B that he always pushes his clients towards when the market maybe doesn't materialize quite to the way that they wanted. And this is still a really player friendly deal, I think, in a lot of ways where, based on the incentives, it can get up to 21 million, but also the fact that he could just opt out after 1 year. And I think a lot of the concerns that teams had of, okay, you have a guy that cut his walk rate in half from his career average in 2025. You had a guy that adjusted his arm angle and found more success at the top of the zone. All of these things that you can't really bank on 4 years of data. You're banking on 1 year of really, really good data and 3 years of pretty good data. I think teams wanted to see a little bit more before they gave up nine figures. I don't think Imai has to do much in 1 year in Houston to show teams that. Like, I don't think he needs to be that guy immediately. I think if he shows 160 innings at a low fours, I still think he opts out, and I still think he ends up getting a pretty big payday. So I think it worked out well for him. I was also just fascinated at how, I don't want to use the word desperate, but how willing the Astros were to give up a lot of money and a lot of downside to just get 1 year of Imai here while staying under the competitive balance tax there.
Yeah, very close to the tax. I know that that's where they are. And so I think this closes the book on bringing back Framber Valdez. We have not heard a word about him, and he's been their best pitcher for years. And so right now, it would appear Hunter Brown, who of course is their ace, he'll go into the season. Christian Javier, Imai, and then a lot of questions after that. Lance McCullers Jr., who I like a lot, has just unfortunately never been healthy. And when I mean never, I mean never. And then Mike Burrows, of course, who they just got in the offseason. We'll see if that can translate into him starting 20, 25 games this season. Again, the starting five is never the same in June than it is in March, but that's the story for Houston. All right. Meanwhile, the Toronto Blue Jays, as they await a decision on Kyle Tucker, most people feel like they'll be at least in the mix there. They do get some nice offense to complement their offense in Kazuma Okamoto, who also had a deadline to sign. His numbers also impressive overseas and didn't break the bank necessarily. So why did the Blue Jays opt to go this route as opposed to maybe somebody else, even their own guy like Bo Bichette or maybe Alex Bregman or someone else? Is doesn't seem like a financial deal. The Blue Jays seemingly willing to do whatever, and that shows you a couple of years ago when they were trying to get Shohei Otani as well. So they land Akamoto. What does it mean for their lineup?
I think it makes a lot of sense because he fits the bill of what they like with the defensive versatility and the way that they're going to be able to mix and match here. It's a similar skill set to Addison Barger. It looks different, but it's a similar skill set for a guy that can play third base, corner, outfield, and also probably a little bit more comfortable at first base than a Barger is with the experience that he's had. But what I like about it is because of that versatility, because of what Okamoto brings to the table, you can be better off with him, but not be out on some of these other players that I'm sure they still want to sign. But it's abundantly clear at this point that the Tucker thing is not going to sort itself out anytime soon. The Bregman thing's
Yeah.
probably not going to sort itself out anytime soon. And then Bichette thing's probably not going to sort itself out. And this, with the NPB players or KBO players with a posting fee, like, as you mentioned, there's a deadline. So you don't want to swing for the fences and then end up missing out on, a double here as well. And I think with the versatility that Okamoto has, they still have the ability to go target and then mix and match the way that they want with that lineup. And I love the way that the Blue Jays, even if they don't make any other moves, can set themselves up matchup wise. Ernie Clement crushes lefties. Andres Jimenez should never see a lefty. You look at Barger, maybe you shelter him from lefties now. Okamoto's a guy that had an 1100 OPS against left-handed pitching last year. So it unlocks a little bit of mixing and matching there lineup wise. And I think that's something that the Blue Jays are probably going to lean into even more this coming season.
One player that at least appears to maybe sign before the other ones could be Cody Bellinger, whose market certainly is narrowed at this point, and one of those teams could be the New York Yankees, who of course have a lot of familiarity with him. And last night on Yes Network, Jack Curry of the network reported that Bellinger is there's a gap in the signing there. I reported this past week that the Marlins and the Yankees were talking about Edward Cabrera. I just don't see that happening. He said nothing is imminent. I can tell you that it's probably lower than that at this point. And then Bo Bichette, who I think will probably get a nice contract too, unlikely. So, I mean, I think it's probably as simple a ROM to me is that they end up with Bellinger and that's their offseason. At least that's the way that I view the Yankees at this. How about you?
It, I kind of see it the same way. And I mean, if there's a significant or just a decent gap between Bellinger and the Yankees, they would have to really think highly of Kyle Tucker, I think, then for there not to be a gap between them. And I think Tucker's just a comfortably a better player, but clearly they're not, I think, jumping out of their seats to spend big money this offseason. At least that's the way that it's looked. And so maybe something will look a little bit different. Maybe they'll surprise us. But I think with the way the market has kind of set itself up, I think Bellinger clearly had a lot of success there. There's little reason not to go back. I think he has obviously a good relationship with Aaron Judge. The team's had it's still a decent amount of success, and I think they need him. I think the skill set that he
Yeah.
brings is important for that team, and he can plug a lot of different gaps, and especially just with what he can do in center field, I still think is really valuable. So I agree. I just don't know if there's a better fit than him going back to where he's already been successful and comfortable. And, I think clearly his teammates want him there as well. And I do think that's going to ultimately matter a little bit, especially when Aaron Judge is the one that's clamoring a little bit more.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. But again, with the way that baseball works here, you hear, oh, they got to sign now. They really do not. I mean, nobody needs to sign
No.
until spring training. Unfortunately, as sad as this whole situation is, it does feel like we are headed down there again. January could be quiet, unfortunately. All right, one more signing, and then we'll take a break and bring it back for the rest of the topics here. We did have a pretty significant baseball pitching signing. This is Tyler Mahle, who has now bounced around the league quite a bit recently. His numbers are still very good whenever he pitches. 6-4, 2.18 earned run average last year. Not the strikeout guy that some other guys that will get a contract, but the Giants don't necessarily need that in their ballpark. So I think a pretty solid signing here, mid rotation type with health, which should really help them out a lot. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him put together a good year in San Francisco.
In terms of upside for the cost, I think that it's about as good a bang for your buck as you can get. And I think with the Giants, of course, you have the liability of, well, what if he's not available? As you mentioned, availability has been the big question here. But I think that's where they can lean on a little bit of their depth. Maybe the guys that they didn't want to sharpie into the rotation, but are okay plugging into the rotation when they need to. If somebody does go down, like a Hayden Bird song, like even a Blade Tidwell, Carson Wisenhunt, like those are all guys that even Keaton Wynn could plug in there and be serviceable. But that's probably, if you have aspirations to be better than you were last year, you can't just run that back. But that's why I like the idea of okay, the biggest risk with Tyler Mahle is just not being available. But if he is available, he can
Sure.
be a middle rotation type arm. That's the kind of shot you take when you do have some depth of plug and play 5 starter types that, you are ready to go if somebody is unavailable.
Real quick before we break, it doesn't appear that the Giants surprisingly are big in the free agent market for the first time in a while. I mean, last few years they've swung big, missed, but then picked up the pieces and brought other guys in. It doesn't feel like that's happening for them this time around.
I feel like they made their free agent signing in the trade for Rafael Devers, where a lot of the industry felt
Yeah.
like that contract was underwater. But I agree with you. I was expecting to spend a little bit more this offseason. I'm still holding out that they may surprise us.
All right, we'll see. All right, Aram's gonna stick around with us. Philadelphia Phillies make a move in their field staff, which is a name that everyone will be familiar with, and also some smaller moves with the Twins and Orioles. We'll get into that and get Aram's thoughts on the Baseball Hall of Fame announcement coming up. We got Just Baseball coming up in about 15 minutes, so stay on the grid for that. Let's bring back Aram Leighton from JustBaseball.com to go over the remaining signings in baseball, which there aren't a lot of. Let's be honest. I mean, that's just that time of the year where we got to wait this out. Hopefully, next time we bring Aram back, one of these big signings will happen. But for now, let's go to the on-field staff. And A very curious move I thought was the announcement of Don Mattingly, former manager of the Marlins and Dodgers, leaving a great situation in Toronto. But now we've learned that he's joining the Philadelphia Phillies to become the bench coach. And Donnie, with nothing left to prove except for that he can stop doing this. That's what he needs to prove to us, that he can stop and retire and tear a jersey off, but he just can't do it, Aram. He's going to Philadelphia now. And I'm guessing that it's there's two things behind it. Number one, obviously I talked to Donnie about this. I have, and he told me last year that I was like, what are you doing? Like, are you just gonna do this forever? And he's like, well, now my son Louis like really loves baseball, so he's enjoying going to the games and following him around and meeting the players and going to the clubhouse, and so now he doesn't want to stop because of that. So that's one. And then the second thing is that he gets to work with his other son in Preston, and I think that that just has a huge part of it. I would not be surprised, Aram, if this is it. If this is his final year doing it, just to get that 1 year in with his son. It does feel like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you were thinking about retiring, but you surprise everybody and don't, this would be the most understandable explanation and reason why. And obviously, he can do whatever he wants with his career. I think baseball would love to have Don Mattingly around as much as possible. But to your point, like if you're gonna leave the Jays, which was such a good situation, probably means that you're ready to hang it up. But it's hard to pass on such a special opportunity where I'm sure most of his family is going to be there, being able to work with his son there. Like that seems to be the perfect way to go out. And also, like he's got a shot at the ring again too. It's not like he's joining his son on
Yeah, it's true.
the Nationals. He's joining his son on a
Right.
team that we. I think I've picked to win the World Series 2 straight years now. So I love that wrinkle of it as well. And I think for Don, like through the ups and downs and a lot of frustrating years of being maybe the manager of some bad Marlins teams, like he gets it. He had a really good year last year. He's gonna have another good team this year,
Hmm.
and to do it with family, it seems like the perfect way to go out if that's what he does.
If that's it, yeah. And then again, he has a good relationship with Rob Thompson. Even getting Donnie for 1 year is better than none in Philadelphia. So it certainly makes sense there. Okay, so smaller signings here. One team in particular that's been quiet this offseason. That's the Minnesota Twins. Wow. A team that in the offseason we thought would move a bunch of guys. They chose not to. So they're sort of running it back, thinking that maybe they underachieved a little bit last year. Smaller signing for them, Orlando Arcia, who 2 years ago you never would have guessed would get a minor league deal in baseball, but here we are. So look, I mean, the Twins are playing the margins here a little bit. I don't see them diving into any kind of free agency at this point, or they would have done it already. But Arcia definitely adds at least a little depth to what they were trying to do. Again, a player a couple of years ago that was a very big impact player in the league.
And could be a good bounce back for them. It's interesting because I think their infield situation, you mentioned depth, like they need it, right? Brooks Lee often hurt. At this current moment, slated to play shortstop. Royce Lewis, very often hurt, slated to play third base. You need someone that can plug in on the left side of the infield. Luke Keyshaw, your second baseman, also missed time last year with injury. There's hope that that trio can be quite good. You want to roll out and you don't want to block those guys. You want to have them go out there and try to compete and see if they can put together a full healthy season. I really love Luke Keyshaw specifically, but yeah, you need some depth behind those guys. And it's been interesting because there was this tear down of sorts at the deadline, and then as you alluded to, like the Twins aren't ready to fully tear that thing down. And I can kind of understand it. Josh Bell actually, I think, turned in one of the more underrated second halves in Major League Baseball last year, and he's still an above average big league bat. You put him at first base. You still got Buxton. I mentioned the young guys that can swing it a little bit as well. They've got some prospects on the way, and Walker Jenkins and some others as well. The pitching is still decent. You got Pablo and Joe Ryan at the top. It's always going to give you a shot. Ober's no slouch either, even off a bad year.
Mhm.
I think this team that could hang around if everything goes right. And you add in some depth there. I think it shows that the Twins aren't ready to fully punt on this season.
Yeah, it's possible there. Ownership also involved, maybe some sales too, maybe harder to sell a team that's in a rebuild than not, and that's going on in baseball as well. Okay, so a very popular postseason player named Big Christmas Noel ends up going to the Baltimore Orioles. Is there any potential for this player to play at all? I guess let's end with that, and then I want to get to the Hall of Fame.
It's interesting because I think it's very dependent on Tyler O'Neill's availability. And also Ryan Mountcastle's. I think there's a very realistic scenario where Tyler O'Neill's banged up and Ryan Mountcastle's either banged up or struggling. And I think you have Jhonkensy Noel just slotting right in there as a left-handed masher for you. Another team that needs to play the matchups a little bit. I don't think they want Dylan Beavers to ever really see a lefty. I think they can find ways for Big Christmas to find some short platoon opportunities. But right now, I think Mountcastle and O'Neill are ahead in the pecking order there. But those are two guys that have either missed a lot of time or have struggled. They both did both last year. And I think that's a great insurance policy and a fun player that I'll never fully give up on.
Jeff Kent was through one of the veterans committees named to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Who else will get into the Hall of Fame coming up in a couple of weeks, Aram?
I I'm curious. Like, do you're I this is where I actually love to defer to you because I feel like I end up being too strict with my ballot, and then I see some ballots with nobody, and then I'm like, oh, maybe my make believe ballot, of course, maybe I should be a little bit more generous with it, and then you see some that are ridiculously generous, and now I just think we're in this crazy recalibration point in the Hall of Fame, which I don't think it ever really has fully calibrated because there's so much nuance,
Yeah.
and I think it's a generous word sometimes. I think a few, but every time I look at Beltran, now he's gonna just have that weighing over his head. What is your number?
I think one or two. I think Andrew Jones is going to be a Hall of Famer. Had an incredible 10-year run before his career sort of fell apart. That would be one for me.
I've been surprised at how many votes Utley's been getting too. And now I don't think he gets in this year, but I
Yeah, I
think
don't
he's
think
gonna get a
so.
lot closer than people think. I think
One and
Beltran
a
sneaks his
one and
way in.
nah, 1.5 would be my number. I think that would be it for me. Anyway,
I'll take
Aram,
the
we'll weigh
over.
on this couple of weeks. Thanks again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me always.